My name is Sam Williamson. I'm a lecturer here at the University of Bristol, and I do a lot of research into energy access. So how people use energy, how people generate energy, and how people develop their systems. I've been working with partners in Nepal for the last 15 years, looking at small-scale hydropower systems, and more recently we've been looking at how people use this for electric cooking. I've been working with partners in Brazil, looking at what we call DC microgrids, where people generate electricity using photovoltaic panels and then combine these up together to be able to form a network system. We've been working also in informal settlements in Sierra Leone and Uganda, looking at how people access energy, where you've not got very much infrastructure there and the service provision is really difficult to achieve. So energy networks transfer energy from one place to another, and they can do that often through large pieces of infrastructure. So we often think about the electricity transmission network and distribution network, where it's transmitting electricity from where electricity is generated to where people use it, or the gas network, where we're piping it from stores into people's houses and so on. So non-traditional energy networks are, I guess when we talk about energy networks, we often talk about large pieces of infrastructure. But actually, quite often energy is transmitted and transferred in other ways as well. And so, for example, if you think about bottled LPG, so bottled gas, we use transport networks to be able to actually transmit that and take that from one place to another. If you think about in places in sub-Saharan Africa, in South Asia, and places where they use biomass for heating, then that is often people go and collect that from forests and bring that back into their houses. And if you find in urban environments in those places as well, then actually they are shipped potentially into cities because there are no forests, no trees in those areas. And so these non-traditional, sort of almost informal networks are really, really important for thinking about how energy is being transferred and how energy is being used as well. So I guess people access energy in lots of different ways. I mean, here in the UK, we access energy through the electricity and potentially gas into our homes, and we don't really notice it. And I think that's a way of our life now, and we switch on our light, we expect our electricity to be there, we expect our hot water to be on when we switch it on in the mornings. But we don't really have to think about it quite often. We often don't think about how we're accessing energy, and I think that's a challenge for the Western world to be able to think about. And because we don't think about it, we don't think about how we're using energy and why we're using energy. Whereas if you go to a number of different countries, you will find that people know how they're accessing energy. They know where their energy comes from. They have to pay for it up front. They have to go and collect it potentially. They have to go and use it, that day and pay for what they can afford in that day. So there is a lot more understanding about what energy is and how much it costs and how it's used when you're going to collect it yourself, when you're actually physically going to pick it up, when you're cutting it, when you're buying bits of charcoal and you know how much money you have in your pocket to be able to go and pay for it. And it's a really different way of thinking about energy and a different way of thinking about how we use energy. And it opens up your mind, and it opens up to think about, how can we understand energy better from these people who are having to think about it every single day and make decisions around what they're going to eat, what they're going to cook, the trade-offs between have we got enough money to eat versus how much energy can we afford to spend, or how much money can we afford to spend on energy in that day. So I've worked with partners in Nepal, and in Nepal we've looked at how people access energy off-grid, so where they don't have a connection to any sort of large infrastructure projects. And so thinking about especially their small-scale hydropower systems, there are about 3,300 or so of these locally made small-scale hydropower systems in Nepal, and they are used primarily to generate electricity for domestic uses. So looking at sort of household lighting, charging mobile phones and television sets and things like that, but also for supporting agricultural processing. So a lot of these communities are small-scale farmers, and so are able to process rice and maize and things like this to be able to sell and to add value to their crops, and from that then are able to get more money in the market for those crops. And so micro hydropower has been a real success in Nepal. And building on that as well, the Nepali government have really been pushing this idea about electric cooking over the last 5 years. And so we've been working with our local partner there to be able to try and understand, okay, well, how does electric cooking work in rural areas? And we've done a number of different field trials in both sort of remote rural areas, more urban areas, and that sort of peri-urban grid-connected area as well, to understand actually, are people able to transition from traditional biomass cooking and potentially cooking with gas as well into electric cooking? What are the challenges around that? And we found that actually cooking rice, which is a traditional Nepali staple, is really sort of a simple transition, but other food is actually a bit more difficult, and that's where the challenge goes. But even if you transition sort of just to cooking with rice, you can save about 50% of your firewood, which is incredible. If you have to go and collect your firewood, that's 1 day every 2 weeks that you can save from doing that. So that was amazing. And then we've been working in Brazil, working with a university partner there, and they've been implementing these small-scale microgrids to support, again, remote communities in off-grid situations where they can't get within the Amazon rainforest, where you can't get access to grid energy, and trying to understand what people are using energy for, how they're using it, how resilient, how reliable it is, and then also trying out these different sort of different arrangements of photovoltaic panels, so solar panels, with batteries, and how you can connect up multiple panels together with batteries to form a little microgrid, and if you can do that reliably. And so that's been really interesting, and they've done some amazing things, our partners in Brazil, and that has been really, really interesting work. More recently in Sierra Leone and Uganda, we've been working in informal settlements. So in Freetown, the capital of Sierra Leone, for example, there are about 69 different informal settlements there, which is a large proportion of the urban area. And because they're informal, there's no real requirement from the service provider to give a service there. So we've been looking at water, sanitation and energy access. Most people access electricity, and actually 96% of people we found in both in Freetown and in Kampala, so in Uganda, they have access to grid electricity, but the supply is unreliable, and they're not really able to do a lot with it sometimes, and they sometimes can't afford it as well. One big issue is actually around meters as well. So quite often landlords have the electricity meters and then charge their tenants a certain amount a month. And so we've been trying to work with the communities to understand, okay, well, how can we improve your access to energy services? And one of the projects that we're just running at the moment is looking at building a kitchen in Freetown, in one of the informal settlements there, to see whether, and this would be a community kitchen where people could come in and use modern cooking devices, so electric cooking devices, LPG, and improved cook stoves as well, that will have improve the air or improve indoor air pollution. So quite often if you're just cooking on biomass, if you're just cooking on charcoal, then inside has very high levels of indoor air pollution, so small particulates. But if we have improved ventilation, improved cook stoves and modern cooking fuels, then that is able to hopefully try and improve their situation. So I've been working with, in Nepal, I've been working with an organisation called PEDA, so People, Environment and Energy Development Association. I've been working with them since 2008, when I took a sabbatical, actually work and volunteered in Nepal, and through my research over the last 15 years I've been able to work with them, which has been great, and we've been really pushing the electric cooking agenda in Nepal over the last 4 or 5 years, and they work then very closely with the government through a number of different bodies, which has been great. We've had some really good research work with a local manufacturing company called Nepal Yantrashala, and they have been they've developed with us a new type of turbine for Nepal, and we actually installed it about a year ago in the far east of the country, and this was the first time this turbine has been installed there, and so it's been really good to be able to have the research that we've done here in Bristol, working with the community mobilisers through PEDA, and have an industrial partner to be able to actually really affect change within Nepal, and then have that link to government so we can support changes in policy as well. In Brazil, we've been working very closely with a group called JADAI, which are part of the Federal University of Pará, and they do a lot of work working with communities in the Amazon region to look at their energy access and try and improve that. We've got some good links as well with the University of Sao Paulo, where they've been doing some research again in off-grid situations, but also looking at remote grids and how they might operate, and sort of at the end of grid networks. In Sierra Leone, we've been working closely with our partner, the Sierra Leone Urban Research Centre, and they work very, very closely with informal communities to try and understand the challenges that they face, and how we can sort of work to improve the challenges and their standard of life. And so they've been really instrumental in going out and surveying the population there, and then actually the population that in the informal settlement in Freetown actually suggested some of the ideas that we're taking forwards now to try and implement. In Uganda, we've been working with Makerere University, and we've been working with them to try and understand, very similarly to Freetown, understand what the situation is like in informal settlements for energy access. And so they've gone out and surveyed, and we've been working with them to try and understand, okay, well, again, how can we support that informal community to try and improve their energy service provision. We've also been working with the African Centre for Cities, that's in the University of Cape Town, and looking at more sort of wide-ranging questions around decentralisation of energy systems. Partnerships are so important in the research work that I've been doing over the last few years. Working with partners, we've been able to get so much better understanding about how people are living, and then being able to try and understand the services that are provided for them and how we can improve those services through the local partners. And it's only been able to do with them and alongside them. And quite often they are leading this work, and we are just supporting any technical support alongside it where they don't have those skills. And we're also working with the partners to not only build up our own skills, but building up their skills as well within that. And so there's a real collaboration in this research, and trying to understand where we've got our strengths, where we've got our weaknesses, and where we can work together more efficiently, I guess. So yeah, partnerships are really, really important within this research work, and we wouldn't have been able to achieve all the things we've done without our partners all across the world. The human element is a really important part of energy. We often think of energy and networks as a very technical problem, but actually we've got to remember people are involved in this, and people are actually the crux of what's going on. So how energy is being used is down to people. And so we need to think about everything from culture to social patterns and understanding. And it's a really crucial part of the design process, but it's also a really crucial part of, if you want to implement anything, you have to understand what's going on. What are the cultural challenges against implementing something? How can you work with people to be able to go through that and take them on that journey? How can they take you on that journey as well with them that they're trying to understand? It's not a switch that you switch on and you say, here you are, you've got this solution. It's a real journey going from, this is my understanding, this is your understanding, how can we take this thing through to completion? And we've really noticed that in a lot of the work that we've done, especially around this transition from sort of biomass cooking to electric cooking. We've taken people from not being able to use electric cooking because they think that it's too expensive, to providing them with electric cooking devices and teaching them how to use those electric cooking devices and giving them that confidence to be able to use it, and then them developing their own skills in that, and then assimilating that within their cooking culture. And that has been fantastic to watch. And so the sort of the hard work of our teams on the ground and our partners in Nepal, in Sierra Leone, in Brazil, have been really crucial in being able to do that, and that sort of cultural assimilation with that energy service provision. Listening to people is crucial to be able to understand how people use their energy. And so working out how to listen to them is a really difficult question. And so using local partners, using people who have worked with those communities already, gives you a very clear way in engaging with those communities and those people, to be able to then understand, okay, well, what are their needs? What are their situations? What are their life desires? How do they live? Understanding about culture, understanding about economic pressures, understanding about social things. All of those things are key to be able to listen to somebody and try and have empathy about what's going on in their situation. So non-traditional energy service provision, energy networks, provide an opportunity to be a bit more flexible around how people access energy. And so, for example, if you think about charcoal, you can go and buy half a kilo of charcoal from a seller in a market or in a shop or wherever you are. If that's the amount of money that you can afford, and you don't have to think by the end of the month, have I got enough money to be able to afford that? You know, how much have I spent? And so that it gives that flexibility within what you're doing. And charcoal is, as one of my colleagues has always said, is this sort of original pay-as-you-go type of energy source, because you bought as much as you could afford, and you know how much either you had in your pocket or you think you're going to have in your pocket. And so these sort of infrastructures, because they're informal and because there's no sort of monthly billing system or whatever else, you can pay as you go along, and that's where these sort of systems are really, really beneficial, where you don't have a constant income coming in, you don't have a constant knowledge about what your finances are. And that is the challenge for larger energy systems and more formalised energy structures, to be able to fit in with that. So how do you enable a community that might have seasonal work that comes in and gets a large amount of money for a 3-month period, and the rest of the year it's a bit ad hoc? And how do you enable them to be able to pay for energy services in that sort of way, in that sort of pay-as-you-go way, without overcharging them and overburdening them with large pieces of infrastructure? And that is the real challenge around, or that's where, say, these informal energy networks really do come in. I think cooking is a very cultural thing. Cooking, you know, the way that I cook is because of the way that my mum cooked, and the way that my mum cooked is the way that her family cooked, and that has been passed down from generation to generation. And cooking is a key cultural thing, and so we have to be incredibly sensitive when we're sort of trying to understand how people are cooking and to support people to change not how they cook necessarily, but what they're cooking with. And it's a very difficult thing to do, and our partners in Nepal have really got that down to a sort of a fantastic way of demonstrating things, because they understand the cultures in many different communities across Nepal now, and so that sort of understanding that culture and understanding how that happens, they've worked really hard at it to be able to understand that. There's still this expectation that we in the global north have solutions that we can give to the global south, but actually we need to work together and and understand, okay, well, what are the challenges? And actually there's lots of solutions that local entrepreneurs, engineers are developing in global south economies that can actually really apply to here in the UK, and think about exchanging knowledge, exchanging skills, exchanging capacity. There still is this sort of idea that, again, we make things here and we ship them out, but that then doesn't account for what happens if something breaks down, what happens if something fails. It just then gets thrown away. There's no way to fix something. And so trying to understand that actually we need to think about what the impact of what we're doing and how we're working through that, whether it's developing manufacturing capabilities to be able to develop products for people in country, and thinking about, okay, well, what do they actually need? What is that need for that energy service, for that energy network, for that use? And how can we support, or how can we work with local companies, local policymakers, to be able to get that out to the communities? And so the idea of working, one of the things that we've been really trying to do over the last few years is working with local manufacturers in Nepal, so to develop new different parts of technology, different types of technology. And so thinking about how can we design that technology so it can be built anywhere in the world, and it doesn't have to have the most high-end workshop, or it can be fixed by somebody who can fix motorbikes, or it can be developed by that, so that actually it's got this universality around it to be able to be maintained, to be able to be fixed, to be able to be developed that way. And those are really interesting questions, because from a research point of view, they're completely unanswered at the moment, and they can have a real impact on the economy of a country, and trying to understand, okay, well, how can we build up that sort of knowledge base and work with local companies and local entrepreneurs. Often energy networks are very large, centralised or potentially decentralised, but interconnected systems. But actually, they can't always extend to the far edges of where we might want to be. And so we can develop off-grid systems where there might be a network and a grid there, but they're a lot smaller and they're not connected to a large centralised network. And off-grid systems give an opportunity for localised energy generation. They give an opportunity to use that localised energy generation to provide power and services to that local area. And it's a real opportunity then to localise all of this work. There's a lot of localisation there. And if you take that localisation idea further, then you can say, well, how about we manufacture what we're using in a local manufacturing company? And this is something that Nepal has done really, really well. And so they've taken small-scale hydropower from anything up to about 100 kilowatts, and they can locally manufacture it. There are about 20 companies in Nepal that can locally manufacture most of the micro hydropower system. And this has given them a resilience so that they don't have to send things off to a different country to be able to get it fixed. And it's given an opportunity for this industry to be built up in the country. And so you've got a number of skilled engineers that are able to build, maintain, and gives communities an opportunity just to ring up somebody and say, this is broken, or it sounds like this. And they're able to send an engineer out and fix it as quickly as possible. And so that sort of decentralized manufacturing base gives an opportunity then to actually have something that's much more redundant and resilient within a country. There's a lot of different definitions around microgrids, potentially nanogrids and picogrids, but they're all sort of come from the same idea, that you've got this sort of linking together between generation sources, storage sources or storage elements, and something that uses that, so some sort of load. And you connect them all together and they can operate as a single entity. And then you can also connect that onto a larger network, a larger sort of piece of infrastructure. And so it could be grid connected, or it could be isolated, islanded from that grid. The micro, nano, pico depends on your definition and depends on how much energy is being generated on there. But all in all, it's the same sort of thing. So it's looking at this interconnection between generation, storage, and load.